Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hudson Institute. My name is Riley Walters. I'm a senior fellow here who focus on Taiwan and Japan, Northeast Asian affairs. And I want to thank you all for coming out to our Tuesday morning event here called, what did I title this? A Look at Taiwan's Election Results. So last week, we had another successful election come out of Taipei. William Lai of the Democratic People's Party is now the president-elect, and he will be inaugurated in May this year to become the third consecutive time a DPP party has won, breaking what's called the 8-year curse, where no party in Taiwan has ever won more than 2 consecutive times in a row for the presidential's office. And so we have a great panel here today sort of to discuss the way that the election has also unfolded, a little bit closer look at the results for the presidential's office, but also the legislative yuan. And so what I'll do real quick is just briefly introduce my fellow panel here. Each will give a few minutes of remarks. We'll have a bit of a conversation, and then we'll open up to you, the audience, for questions and answers. So start thinking about what would you like to ask now? So first, to my immediate left, we have Bonnie Glaser. She is the managing director of the German Marshall Fund's Indo-Pacific program. Immediately to her left, we have Ryan Haas, who is the director of the John Thornton China Center and the Chen Fu and Cecilia Yan Ku Chair in Taiwan Studies at the Brookings Institute. And then finally, on the end here, we have Russell Shao, who is the executive director of the Global Taiwan Institute. So Bonnie, if you could maybe perhaps share some of your top thoughts on the election results for everyone. Thanks.
Well, you had specifically asked me to talk about the implications for U.S.-Taiwan relations,
That's right,
but
right.
I'm happy to talk about it more generally
yes,
if you wish. But we did have a division of labor, which you assigned.
It's a secret division of labor. But yes, I can clarify. I did ask each of them to perhaps take a different point of view on the election. I asked Bonnie to perhaps clarify her thoughts on U.S.-Taiwan relations, the implication for U.S.-Taiwan, Ryan to talk about perhaps cross-strait relations, and then Russell to perhaps clarify his thoughts on what the election means for Taiwan internally. So yes, thank you.
Great, thank you, Riley. We can get into all of the issues, so thanks for having me. First of all, I would say there was really nothing surprising in the election results. The polls were fairly accurate. William Lai obviously won a plurality, but not a majority. And that was completely expected. And then the LY, the DPP, of course, lost its majority and lost 10 seats. And the KMT now has a 1-seat edge, but the 2 independents lean blue also. So this has implications, I think, for U.S.-Taiwan relations going forward. I'll leave Russell to talk about the implications for Taiwan. But for the United States, there are definitely agenda items that will be considered by the LY going forward that relate to budgets. Defense spending has been a top concern of the United States, and we've seen under President Tsai for several years, I think it may even be 5, if I'm not mistaken, consecutive increases in defense spending. And so the hope is that that will continue, that there will be passage of special budgets for expensive weapons platforms when needed. And that, of course, again, it will require now some compromise in the legislative UN. So I think there are some concerns that the U.S. has. And I was talking to some of the folks in Congress last week, and one of the things that I encouraged was the CODEL that's going this week. Meet with the opposition. It's always important, I think, to meet with the opposition, but now it's even more important because members of our Congress, as well as, of course, the executive branch, should be communicating what we hope to see done in the legislature. So both the TPP could play sort of a kingmaker role, but the KMT will, of course, remain very important too. And on the overall bilateral U.S.-Taiwan relationship, I think everybody in Washington expects that Tsai Ing-wen will just sort of hand over the baton to Lai Ching-te, and most things will continue. So continuity, I think, is the watchword. Of course, we should not expect Lai Ching-te to be a carbon copy of Tsai Ing-wen. He will be his own leader. And we will see over time what his priority areas are, what his real agenda is, and his vision. And it may differ to some extent from Tsai Ing-wen, but I do expect that there will be a lot of continuity. And so in addition to working together on defense issues, the other area I just want to highlight is the two issues in the economic relationship that the Biden administration has been working on with Taiwan that I hope get across the finish line this year. One is, of course, the double tax agreement, and the other one is the second half, or what remains, of the 21st century initiative with Taiwan. And the sort of low-hanging fruit was passed in the first tranche, and what's left are the really tough issues like agriculture and labor and environment. And so I think these would have been tough negotiations even if the DPP had a majority in the LY. But now we not only have to negotiate the agreement with the incoming government in Taiwan, but we also have to get it passed through the LY. And so I think that will be a challenge. But I think it's really important to strengthen the economic pillar of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. So I do hope that we're able to get that done.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually think that the economic side is going to weigh a lot heavier on the Lai administration than most people think, because that's another conversation.
Okay, good.
But yes, thank you very much. Ryan, perhaps you can share with us your thoughts.
Sure. Well, I will try to offer a few perspectives to get us started on the cross-strait dimension and sort of looking at the election from Beijing's perspective. My impression, talking with the counterparts there, is that they were disappointed with the outcome, but not surprised by it. And I think that part of the reason why is because they're still able to tell themselves a somewhat soothing story. President-elect Lai won with 40% of the vote. That's down relative to President Tsai's performances in 2016 and 2020, where she attracted 57, 58% of the vote. They can tell themselves that 60% of voters voted for someone other than President-elect Lai. They also can tell themselves that the Legislative Yuan shifted in favor of the KMT and the TPP away from the DPP, which also, from a directional standpoint, is the direction that they would prefer to see things go. And so while the outcome doesn't accord with what they had hoped or wished for, the direction of travel still allows them the opportunity to tell themselves that not all is lost in the case of Taiwan. And I think that that informs the way that they have responded. The response that they have provided thus far to the election has demonstrated much more continuity than discontinuity in terms of their overall approach. What we've seen is sort of old elements of the longstanding playbook. They took a diplomatic ally from Taiwan. They have exercised militarily around Taiwan. They have threatened additional economic pressure on Taiwan. This all rhymes with what we have heard and seen in previous iterations. And to his credit, I think that President-elect Lai has been very magnanimous in his comments thus far. I think he's been very precise in the words that he has chosen. And I don't think that he's offered many reasons or justifications for Beijing to go beyond the level of reaction that they have had thus far to the election. And so that's sort of where I see things right now. I'm going to be deliberately brief, Riley, and stop here in hopes that some of those comments provoke a discussion amongst us.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a few follow-ups as well.
Good.
You know, I think that especially here in Washington, there's always a lot of interest in how Beijing is acting, right, or reacts to the election and just generally in the region. All right, Russell, you've got the.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Riley, and then thank you to the Hudson Institute for convening this very timely and important discussion. And very honored to be on stage here with both Ryan and Bonnie, as well as you, Riley, to be able to discuss this very important issues. So my tasking was to talk about the domestic implications of Taiwan's presidential and legislative elections. And basically, I think I like to make three general observations and implications as well with regards to the election results. Some of these points have already been sort of alluded to by my prior speakers. But the first point of which is, of course, the presidential race. And in the presidential race, voters handed the ruling Democratic Party an unprecedented third consecutive term in office. I think that is significant in itself, given the fact that this is the first time in Taiwan's democratic history that the voters decided that they were going to hand the top executive power to the ruling party. Nonetheless, though, I think there is important nuances there to unpack, given the fact that the margin of victory for the DPP in this presidential race was much less than that of its victory in the 2020 elections. So in the presidential race, the president-elect Lai and his running mate, the former representative to the United States, Shelby Kim, received 40% of the popular vote versus the 33% that Ho You-yi and Zhao Saokang received. This is a spread of 7% versus a spread of 19% in 2020 when President Tsai Ing-wen and Vice President-elect Lai Ching-te at the time received 57% of the popular vote. So they can't be comfortable necessarily with the decrease in the margin of victory, given the fact of the spread in the two elections. Nonetheless, I do think that this election does indicate a preference of the voting population within Taiwan for a continuity of the status quo, at least as presented by the Democratic Progressive Party's candidates. That having been said, I think with the margin of victory being less than it was in 2020, it does indicate that there is a degree of incumbency fatigue within Taiwan that is reflected within pollings that were done in the run-up to the elections, with the desire of the population to have some sort of political change, but not necessarily knowing exactly how that's going to play out politically. And so I think what this suggests to me is that the incoming Lai Chao administration has a weaker mandate than her predecessor. This certainly makes, I think, governance and leadership somewhat more challenging and difficult. And there are other variables that I think is going to layer on top of that is going to make, again, the incoming Lai Chao administration a more challenging period for governance within Taiwan that I will get to. The final point I'll make about the presidential election is that given the incumbency fatigue and this desire for political change within Taiwan's voting population, the fact that the DPP was able to still win in the presidential race, I think speaks a bit more about the failure of the opposition parties to provide a compelling alternative than really saying a ringing endorsement of the DPP's policy achievements over the past 4-8 years. There are, of course, still some and underlying dissatisfaction with governance issues that were, over the last 8 years, social economic issues that continues to be present in Taiwan's political discourse. And that was an area that the oppositions tried to capitalize off of, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I think given the alternatives provided by the opposition, the plurality of the population within Taiwan decided that they were more comfortable with going with the positions and the policy of the DPP. The second observation and implication I will make is regarding the legislative UN race. And where the incumbency fatigue played out most notably. And in that race, as referenced earlier, the main opposition party, the Chinese Nationalist Party, Kuomintang, gained 52 seats, which represents a plurality of the 113 seats in the Legislative Yuan. This was a gain of 14 seats from the 2020 legislative elections. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party lost its majority, lost 10 seats, and dropped from 61 seats to 51 seats. So, the KMT has a very razor-thin, edge over the DPP. Most notably, and perhaps, kind of flies under the radar to some extent, given the low number that they obtained, the Taiwan People's Party, the third political party that vied for both presidential as well as legislative power, managed to obtain 8 seats in the Legislative Yuan. Now, those 8 seats actually can prove to be decisive in a legislative power balance, where you need 57 votes in order to gain a majority. So if you think about the composition of 52 seats versus 51, neither major political party can actually dominate the legislation without the support of the TPP. So in that sense, I think the TPP certainly walks away from this presidential and legislative race with could claim quite a victory in terms of their achievements there. Not to mention, of course, the fact that as a third-party candidate, without really a national organization or resources that the other political parties can command, as well as any sort of cross-section of local political offices that they can control, like the other 2 major political parties, Ko-Winter, the Taiwan People's Party's presidential candidate, managed to score still 26% of the popular vote. So it is a respectable showing, even though the fact that he had lost the presidential election and has of course, it's the smallest political party within Taiwan. That really sort of represents a third sort of observation and implications that I would want to highlight, and that is for observers to not dismiss, certainly the failure of the KMT's ability to win the presidency, or the fact that the TPP, the third political party, having not obtained a real sort of significant representation within the LY as being a dominance of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party in the makeup of and then over the next 4 years. I think essentially, at the end of the day, the point that I would like to make is that all 3 political parties can walk away from this election claiming a sense of victory in one way or another, right? The DPP scoring unprecedented 3rd consecutive term in office, clearly a preference for continuity in the national policies, of the ruling party. But I think the people also have expressed a desire for some checks and balances, and a desire for some type of political change, and decided to hand that legislative oversight to the KMT as well as the other opposition parties, and then thirdly, I think potentially I think I'll leave it to the political scientists to really sort of study the implications, but perhaps a genuine rise of a third political party within Taiwan in the relatively strong showing of the TPP. I think, final point I will make about the TPP is that, obviously this is not the first time that a third political party in Taiwan tried to vie for political power, but nevertheless, unlike, say, the more recent phenomenon of the New Power Party that was able to that grew out of the Sunflower Movement of 2014 and was able to storm, into the LY with, a pretty small but, sort of visible number of seats in the LY, and more or less dissipated now in the 2024 election due largely to internal fragmentation and the lack of a really sort of strong political leadership. Ko-Winter, of course, represents that sort of leadership within the TPP. But on the flip side of that is also there's another case of the People's First Party, which is, again, an individual-led personality in James Song, who over time, of course, since the 2000 election, which is when after it had been formed, we never could break out of that sort of one-person mold and become a much more broader and political force. So I'll leave it at that. I think I've probably exhausted all the time that I have already, but happy to get into deeper and broader conversations with all of you.
No, thank you. I mean, we could obviously sit here and talk about the history of Taiwan's political
love to
history
do that.
for quite some time. But one of the interesting things you mentioned was this idea of incumbency fatigue, and I think you're definitely right in that regard. When I was there for the election, some of the people that we spoke with definitely gave a sense that. So when you vote in Taiwan, for those who are unfamiliar, you essentially have 3 votes that you cast. You vote once for who you would like for the president, one for your local elective representative, and then a third vote for the party that you would prefer as a proportionate. 34 of the seats in the LY are distributed based on that party vote. And so one of the things that we saw, or at least again what I was saying is, some of the people that we spoke with really had this sense or the desire to split the vote, essentially casting their vote for live for the presidency, but for a different party in the LY. And what we saw, so that you mentioned the TPP, for example, their 8 seats only came through this proportional response. TPP, the man who ran for president under the TPP, Ko-wen-je, he was very much sort of the head figure of the party, if you will. But it goes to show that there really isn't perhaps a second, but there is an interest in this third party or alternative party option.
Right.
So let's have a little bit of a conversation. I'll just kind of build off of some of the things you were mentioning. Bonnie, one of the things you talked about was obviously there's going to have to be more of a negotiating between the president's office and the LY now, or the parties at least, to pass things like budget. Budget was a really big issue. I think the opposition parties would say things like the DPP is passing these, what do they call them, special budgets without any consultation. Do you expect, for example, things like budgeting to maybe becoming more of a contentious issue, slowing down? There's implications, I think, for U.S. interests in this, because if they can't pass a budget, then they can't buy us weapons. I mean, we can offer them grants. But what are your thoughts, perhaps, on this?
So, as I said, I think that this will be contentious. It will be very unlike the past. But first, I would say, as a general comment, that I doubt that the KMT and TPP will forge a solid coalition and be obstructionist on everything. Right. I don't really think that serves Ko-wen-je's interests and his party's interests. Mm-hmm. So if he wants to strengthen the role of his party, then he is likely to align sometimes with the KMT and other times with the DPP. Right. And in fact, I think if you look at historically how the LY has functioned in Taiwan, negotiations really are on an issue-by-issue basis in any case. So there will be issues that relate to defense, and then obviously there will be other issues. It's my understanding, I think this is correct, that if an overall budget that the government presents to the LY is not passed as a new budget for the following year, that unlike our system, where everything comes to a screeching halt, the budget from the prior year essentially is applied. And so there are just no changes. Which is an interesting way to govern, and maybe makes sense. But Taiwan, I think, is going to have a lot of conversation between the parties about how they're going to allocate funds. And how much Taiwan's economy grows going forward will be an important factor. So if Taiwan's economy grows at a higher rate, then there's probably going to be more willingness to increase defense spending. And if not, then it becomes even more difficult.
Right, right. You also mentioned, it's not just perhaps budget that they're going to have to compromise on, but things like the trade initiative with the United States that's ongoing. In the past, agriculture has always been a very sensitive issue, and so you've also said, sort of the low-hanging fruit of trade negotiations have been captured, and going forward, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot harder here in the United States, I think, over this next year as well. And so do you have any what's your crystal ball on trade negotiations going forward?
I don't want to be pessimistic. I'd rather be optimistic. I will say that after the negotiations really started, that USTR had said some very positive things about the interactions, the negotiations, how committed both sides have been to getting this done and bringing it across the finish line. It was, I think, helpful to divide it in half and have the first set of issues completed and signed and ratified by the LY. So I think that then hopefully will pave the way to making it possible to negotiate the rest of the agreement. But as I noted earlier, and you just said, of course, highlighting the agricultural issues, labor is going to be very difficult too. And as I said, environmental issues. So this politically, it comes at a difficult time for the United States as well as for Taiwan. But my hope is that there's so much commitment to the U.S.-Taiwan relationship and strengthening it that we will be able to get it done.
Yeah, and there's other things that could kind of happen in the midterm as well, like the tax agreement that you mentioned. That's not specifically a part of the trade negotiations.
That's different agreement.
It could definitely help. Ryan, I don't think we really saw, you mentioned a few of the reactions that we saw out of Beijing. Their Taiwan Affairs Office, had some really, typical response. Their Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's the usual rhetoric. Would you really say they've really done anything spectacular in response to this? Or is it just kind of par of the course? It's not like we saw like a Nancy Pelosi kind of reaction where we saw missiles being shot around Taiwan and a huge military reaction. Would you say that the response has been pretty muted up to this point?
Well, I wouldn't want to give Beijing any credit for the way that they've responded thus far. I mean, they have said some tough things, they have done some tough things, and I expect that they will do more. But I think that what they have done has been on a continuum rather than breaking from the past trajectory. And so they're operating within the parameters of their existing policy framework. In other words, I don't yet have the impression that Beijing has decided that the most recent election is a watershed moment that compels them to throw out their old playbook and develop a new one. I think that that is sort of the starting point from which we should be evaluating and looking at China's responses. And the interesting question is why? Why haven't they? And I mentioned a few of the factors. I think that they are capable of telling themselves a reassuring story that not all is lost. But I also think that they want to preserve a certain degree of escalation space in the future. In other words, if they overreacted or dramatically reacted on January 14th, what are they going to do in May at the inauguration? What will they do afterwards if there are events that occur that spark their ire? And so I think that part of it is pragmatic. And tactical. They want to preserve space to continue to ratchet up as they believe events justify. I think part of it also is a reflection of the fact that they have a lot of challenges that they're dealing with at home, from youth unemployment, a slowing economy, et cetera, et cetera. And then on top of that, if you look at the totality of statements that have been made by Chinese senior officials responsible for foreign affairs, one of the consistent themes of the past month has been a real desire to prioritize stabilizing relations with the United States. Yeah. I think after the President Biden and President Xi met in San Francisco, President Xi said that there's a San Francisco spirit or a vision, I can't remember which one.
Vision, I think.
San Francisco vision. Bali spirit and San Francisco vision. So a San Francisco vision that should guide the approach to the relationship. And when Liu Jianchao visited the United States, when Ambassador Xie Feng gave his remarks on the 45th anniversary, when Wang Yi provided his annual statement, there's a dramatic prioritization on stabilizing U.S.-China relations that is a continuous through line. And I think if you add all those pieces together, it begins to sort of explain the posture that Beijing has adopted in response to the election thus far.
So the hope that, I don't know if hope is the right word, but the hope that Beijing hasn't necessarily lost an inroad into Taipei yet. Where does it go in the future? Because my sense is that within the KMT, there's definitely, I think we saw this throughout the election, there's definitely still different voices within the party. And of course, the KMT being the most outspoken about re-engaging with Beijing. I would say, we had Ma Ying-jeou did an interview on Deutsche Welle talking about how we need to trust Xi Jinping. But then we had the actual candidate, Hou Yi, who was saying, we need to, actually very much more similar to things like what the DPP and TPP were saying, where we need to find more of a balance,
right, engaging
with the United States and international partners to build resilience, things like that. And so how is let's say, I'm being sort of blunt here, but is Beijing losing the KMT? It's sort of a voice with the KMT.
The honest answer is I don't know. I hope that you can suspend your moderator hat for a second to share your perspective because you were just in Taiwan. But I don't think that Beijing believes that they have lost the KMT. I do think that Ma Ying-jeou's comments on the eve of the election were ill-advised, and I think that's reflected in the way that the KMT responded by basically saying that he is not welcome at the closing rallies at the end of the election cycle. That should tell us something about where sort of the core of the KMT, or at least the team that was running for the top of the ticket in the KMT, sees things. My impression is that all three parties' leading candidates sort of went to a muddled middle to try to attract votes in this election. They didn't want to have differentiation over cross-strait issues be the deciding factor in the election. And what's interesting as I sort of reflect upon the results is that in 2008, the election was really a referendum on Chen Shui-bian. In 2016, the election was largely a referendum on Ma Ying-jeou. Here we are in 2024, it was not a referendum on Tsai Ing-wen. And I think that part of that owes to the fact that Tsai Ing-wen governed in a way that didn't allow the national debate inside Taiwan to be a referendum. She was moderate, she was steady, she was predictable, and she had a sort of clearly articulated, consistent set of principles that guided her approach. And it was an approach that was broadly supported by a Taiwan population that is overwhelmingly favorable for the cross-strait status quo.
Excellent.
If I could just add one sentence. My own sense is that the KMT is really in a deep discussion internally about the 1992 consensus. And I don't know what the outcome of that debate will be, but I think that Beijing knows that. And I think that will be very crucial going forward if the KMT actually walks away from the 1992 consensus. If it does so by itself or in sort of consultation with Beijing, that would have a very different outcome. But I think that that will be really crucial going forward in Beijing's assessment of the KMT.
Yeah, really sort of these party, they're evolving, which is very interesting.
Yeah, Riley, if I may just a quick two-finger on this, I think you really hit the nail on the head on a very important issue to watch going forward, which is, who is going to lead the KMT going forward, right? When the KMT lost its election in 2016, to Tsai Ing-wen, the base of the party of the KMT flirted with the fringes of the political party by nominating selecting Hong Xiuzu as the chairperson of the political party. And her position on cross-strait relations did represent not necessarily the establishment wing or the more moderate wing of the party, but rather one that was far more conciliatory towards the PRC. Now, it's it's far from assured whether or not, in the wake of the loss of the presidential election in 2024, to what extent the party may once again turn in a different direction. I think with the leadership of Eric Zhu, who I think represents much more of the moderate establishment wing of the political party and has tried, at least under his leadership, to, in the legislative yuan race, nominate and select more moderate candidates to run in those races. And the success that I think he has had with the legislative yuan races with 14 seats that he was able to obtain for the party, that should demonstrate a relative success of his strategy. But nonetheless, still, I think there are calls within the KMT for Eric Zhu to step down. And in that vacuum, it is still, I think, an unknown whether or not the more conservative base of the political party represented by more these traditional factions could again influence the direction of that party and the reforms that have been attempted and halted and then kind of sort of set aside as a result of these internal issues within the KMT that they are still struggling to overcome. So I think this is a very important issue to watch, and I think Bonnie referenced earlier the importance of the international community to engage the opposition parties now, given the fact that they control a majority of the legislative yuan. But even more importantly, I would add, is that is the susceptibility of this new power balance within the legislative yuan to open potentially new avenues by which the People's Republic of China can engage in more concerted influence operations and interference activities in the LY in ways that would perhaps have far more substantive impact than even the escalation that it has taken in the run-up to the 2024 elections. And just earlier to the point of what Ryan had said, I think really the starting point analysis should actually not be its response to the election, but really the escalation that has taken in the run-up to the election, where we've seen a very comprehensive set of pressure tactics and interference activities that was aimed, clearly at influencing and interfering in Taiwan's democratic politics. But to the strength of Taiwan's democracy and its resiliency, I think the results I think have been reflective of of growing resilience and the success of the countermeasures that Taiwan has taken to address those issues.
Absolutely, yeah. Food for thought. So we're going to open up for questions and answers now. We're going to have our first one right here in the front. If you can, please state your name, affiliation if you like, and then, of course, keep it to a question.
Hi, I'm Ken Moriyasu from Nikkei Asia. Thank you very much for this. We talked about China's recent policy being stabilizing the relations with the US. And that kind of hints that deterrence so far is working. There are many reasons that could be behind this. The reason for deterrence working, one, could be that the challenges that Beijing has at home, like Ryan said. It could be the military readiness. There was reports that China is filling missiles with water instead of fuel. It could be Biden's success at rallying allies and partners. But most importantly, it could be Biden himself's position or commitment to defending Taiwan using American troops. He has said that for 4 times. My question is about a potential Trump presidency and his recent comments on whether a Trump administration would defend Taiwan with the US military if it came to that. And he did not answer the question directly. Instead, he said that Taiwan took the chip business entirely from the US. So my question is, what do you think Trump's personal stance is on US defending Taiwan? And 2, if he is not as committed as President Biden, will this change Beijing's calculus? Thank you.
I'll run interference on this one and just say we don't have to comment on what we think Trump thinks. But if you would like to comment perhaps on what you think the next administration position should be on Taiwan, I'll open it up to anyone. Anyone who'd like to jump on that grenade.
I'm happy to start. I personally think that the factors that you mentioned initially have shaped Xi Jinping's thinking. I think that Xi Jinping is focused on problems in the Chinese economy, rooting out corruption in the military. We've heard senior U.S. officials say that they believe that a Chinese attack on Taiwan is less likely as a result. I completely agree with Ryan that Xi Jinping wants to preserve stability in the U.S.-China relationship. And I think that if we have a change in our president, that the Chinese will seek to preserve stability in the relationship with that new president. There's a really interesting debate, at least from my perspective, in China about what U.S. president would be best for China. You know, the Trump administration or Donald Trump himself, they see as transactional. They were successful in dealing with him up until the COVID pandemic broke out. And they know that he doesn't attach great importance to allies, which, of course, President Biden has. And they believe that Donald Trump doesn't attach much significance to the U.S.-Taiwan relationship or to Taiwan in general. So for all those reasons, some people would prefer Trump. But I'm hearing more and more from Chinese experts that now that they have had a successful leadership level meeting and achieved something with the United States, that they want to sustain this. And they're not confident that they will have this predictability with President Trump if he is elected. And so therefore, many people are saying they would like to see Biden reelected. And so that goes to the issue of, you know, what would Trump do? We don't know. But there would be a lot of pressure from members of Congress, certainly, who were bipartisan, very supportive of Taiwan. But we just don't know whether Trump would change the views that he has. And we all know from John Bolton's book about the references to this is the resolute desk representing China and Taiwan being the tip of the Sharpie pen. So we don't know whether he's changed his views, but Trump has never come out and said that he would not defend Taiwan, and I think that's important.
If I could just build upon what Bonnie said, you know, as I think about the relationship between the United States and Taiwan, there are sort of golden rules that guide it when it works well. And those golden rules include mutual respect, treating each other's top officials with dignity and respect. They include transparency on each side's engagement with Beijing on issues that implicate cross-strait issues. And perhaps most importantly, there is a golden rule about preserving bipartisan support in both Taipei and Washington for the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. The relationship doesn't work if it's only supported by one party on each side or one party on one side. It needs to be supported by all parties on both sides to function effectively. And so whatever happens in our upcoming election, I hope that there is conscious effort to try to preserve the ability of both political parties in the United States and all three political parties in Taiwan to continue to robustly support the U.S.-Taiwan relationship.
I think the only point that I would add with regards to what a future president should do is to think holistically about deterrence. Military hard power is critical, but the international support, the economic dimensions of deterrence are also critical. In fact, I think the economic component of this could really tip the balance in affecting the cost-benefit calculation of the People's Republic of China in deciding whether or not it is worth the risk and the enormous costs that could come about from taking military action against Taiwan. And so, you know, whoever may be the next president of Taiwan, I think, should continue to take the necessary steps to work closer with like-minded partners and allies to become more engaged with Taiwan, because that international support also bolsters not only the resiliency of the Taiwan population so that it does not feel isolated from the PRC's incessant pressure campaign, but also to affect Beijing's consideration of whether or not, in the event of a different scales of military conflict, it may be met with not only just a potential U.S. intervention, but the intervention by other allies and like-minded partners. And here is where the economic dimensions of the international community's support for Taiwan could come and play a very critical role in really disrupting the type of cost-benefit calculations that is obviously going on in Beijing in terms of its considerations of planning and preparations for a potential Taiwan contingency.
Any other questions? We'll go up in the front here, and then we'll go back there.
Hi, thank you for the discussion. My name is Yuko Mukai from Japanese newspaper Yomiuri Shimbun, also a non-resident fellow of Project 2049. My question is kind of follow-up. So if Trump presidency comes again, so there is an ongoing discussion in Congress and some of the how U.S. should use the defense budget. So there is some group which insists to abandon Ukraine and put more resources in Taiwan Strait or deter China. And if it happens, would it deter China more militarily? But what kind of signal to China that not supporting Ukraine but supporting Taiwan?
Let's take one more. In addition here, this gentleman behind you.
Yes, my name is Stephen Bezo. I'm with the National Guard Bureau. I would like to get your thoughts on the role that the Vice President-elect Xiaobi Kim will play in the new administration. Thank you.
So 2 questions here. One on sort of defense budget under a new administration, and second, of course, who many of us, I think, know pretty well, former Representative of the United States, Xiaobi Kim, her role to play. Floor is open. Bonnie, perhaps you would like to take either one of those first?
Sure. I'll start by saying on the second question, historically, the vice president in Taiwan has not played a strong role, really hasn't in the United States either. There's no constitutionally defined role for the vice president. So I think this will be very different. I mean, I remember, I think it was when Annette Lu was the vice president for Chen Shui-bian, and I think she complained that she was treated as wallpaper. So this will not be the case, I think, with Bi Kim Xiao. I think that William Lai will be very well served by consulting her on many issues. And it's not just the relationship with the United States and understanding U.S. policy, but she has very strong international presence, her understanding of the international community. She's very strong networks. And I'm confident that strengthening ties with the international community is going to remain a high priority for Lai Ching-te. So I think that they will have a great sort of partnership on issues relating to national security. Of course, we shouldn't expect that William Lai will cede this portfolio to Bi Kim Xiao. The president in Taiwan has responsibility for national security, for foreign policy, and for cross-strait relations. And so I think that they will sort of work together as a team. He will consult with her. I imagine she will be dispatched to travel places around the world, but I don't think he's going to step back and give her any of those portfolios, because those really belong to the president.
Absolutely. Thoughts on either of the questions? About
let me take the question with regards to Ukraine and Taiwan. Let me take this from the sort of domestic political angle within Taiwan and how a withdrawal of U.S. support for Ukraine could impact Taiwan domestically. And I think in this regard, if you consider the the themes within Taiwan's domestic politics following Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, there was a model that was sort of repeated time and time and again, which is Ukraine today, Taiwan tomorrow, and there was this concern that what was happening to Ukraine could happen to Taiwan. And I think that, were there to be a perceived, withdrawal from U.S. support for, Ukraine, could have implications on affecting, whether or not, to what extent, U.S. commitments to Taiwan could be relied upon. There are obviously distinctions between the case of Taiwan and Ukraine, given the nature of the commitments involved and the relationship with the United States, and certainly in those regard, Ukraine is not Taiwan. But in the broader framework of this contest between democracies and authoritarianism, it's hard to disentangle the implications of a democratic frontline democracy facing the threat of Russia's ongoing assault on its territory and its sovereignty, for what that implies for other parts of the world. And given the fact that I think there is concerns that Putin's success in Ukraine could embolden Beijing. This could amplify fears and concerns within Taiwan that a conflict may be more imminent than it appears in the Taiwan Strait. So, I think, with that consideration in mind and the sensitivities of public opinion and sentiments within Taiwan, I think there would be concerns about whether or not, this, a withdrawal of U.S. support for Ukraine, whether or not that is coming, could have within Taiwan. And I think there is great solidarity amongst the Taiwan population with the plight of the Ukrainian people and its in defending its territory against Russia's illegal invasion. And so I think it's an issue that bears careful consideration as to the extent to which U.S. commitments internationally can have on the perception of those commitments as it relates to Taiwan. And I'll just echo Bonnie's comments with regards to the role of Vice President-elect Xiao. I think she is a very well-respected and known hand in U.S.-Taiwan relations, and I think deliberately drafted by President-elect Lai in order to serve as vice president for the specific reasons of her international relations experience, an area for which, arguably, the president-elect has lacked in terms of his own experiences with foreign affairs, and with Vice President-elect Xiao, I think he has a very capable and experienced diplomat as well as policy practitioner to understand the nuances and intricacies of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, to be able to manage both what Taiwan's policy towards cross-strait relations should be, but also understand where those red lines are that need not be crossed, and to manage those carefully so that you can really increase the margins for positive interactions that will help to preserve stability and improve relations between the United States and Taiwan.
Ryan, you had a couple thoughts. Yeah.
I'm just going to add two sentences to the great comments that have been made. The first is that, yes, Bi-khim Xiao is a force of nature. So I associate with that. The second is that any day that the United States abandons Ukraine is going to be a horrible day for Taiwan, period. No matter what we say about how much we love Taiwan, it'll be a catastrophically bad day for Taiwan. And don't take my word for it. Listen to what President Tsai says. Listen to what Bi-khim Hsiao says. Listen to what President-elect Lai says. This is bad, and it's serious. I think that we are engaging in a sort of a fallacy if we think that if we abandon Ukraine but say we love Taiwan, that Taiwan will be better off. It just simply won't, period. So I think that we should be honest with ourselves and our community about this. And it will be unfortunate because if you look at the record of the past year, the United States has built pretty significant momentum in Asia with Japan and South Korea, with AUKUS, with the Quad, with the Philippines. There is sort of a strong sense that, that there is a favorable tailwind to American efforts in the region. This would reverse that. It would be a glorious day for propaganda writers in Beijing to be able to make the case that, that America is absent and unreliable. And beware, you Taiwan friends, beware, you Filipino friends, of who you're depending upon for your security. And so, as a community, I just implore us to be clear and direct in making this point.
If I could build off of that, there is clear bipartisan support for Taiwan within Congress. And as Congress has shown time and again through specific bills or the NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act, there's been support for Taiwan and military support for Taiwan. And I think that could potentially continue. One thing we don't talk about a lot of, because there tends to be more focus on the presidential race, but Congress does change with the president around the time of the presidency as well. And so it'll be interesting to watch how that sort of unfolds as well over the next year to your specific question about defense spending in Congress. But
if I could just add one short point, there's obviously growing skepticism, doubt in Taiwan about whether the United States would come to Taiwan's defense. And of course, if we are no longer going to defend Ukraine, that is going to increase dramatically. And there's a correlation between, we've seen this in public opinion polls, in confidence in Taiwan, in the United States coming to Taiwan's defense, and the people's willingness to fight to defend Taiwan. And so the more that we're doing to prepare and have funding Ukraine, giving them confidence that we would be able to and willing to defend Taiwan, the more that the people of Taiwan will be willing to defend Taiwan. And Taiwan demonstrating its own resolve to defend themselves, I think, is a really strong factor in strengthening deterrence.
perhaps we can call it a win-win.
Yeah, okay.
All right, with that, we're going to call it for today. Thank you again for coming out this morning. Please, of course, stay tuned to the Hudson website. We have plenty of events going on weekly, monthly, on all kinds of issues ranging across the Indo-Pacific to Europe and elsewhere. So again, thank you to our panel for making the time to join us this morning.
Thank you,
Thank you, Riley.
Of course, and again, please stay tuned. Thanks.